the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and this is Maggie. In case you're new with us, she's the star of the show. Anyway, today's topic is remembering who you are, and I have noticed that when we suffer through difficult times, that we tend to shut ourselves off from the pain of that moment, and when we leave that behind, we often leave behind very important parts of ourselves that are profoundly strong and resilient. So we're going to dive into that dynamic today. But before we get started, let's take a minute to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen just flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing every cell, every organ, bringing vital life energy. And as you exhale, exhale any tension or stress, any negativity or fatigue. And now let's just take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And this time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating all your cells, energizing and electrifying all your electrons, your molecules, and lighting you up from the inside out as you exhale. Exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and softly, softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel how incredibly delicious it is to have the experience of such wonderful sensation and so easily accessible to us. And bring yourselves present right here, right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to be here with you guys, and let's talk about this phenomenon about how when we move on. Good morning, Rosalind. Exactly. Rosalind says, "Good morning. Remembering who you are or reflecting on who you are not anymore." Beautifully said, Rosalind. I love it. And yes, so who we're not anymore. So I've had a couple clients that it's very, very interesting, really powerful people, that really dynamic people who have been very, very commanding in their ability to lead and empower others. And these both of these people, I'm thinking of two in particular, but both of them got to a place where they were in a deep place of pain, and life had kind of turned upside down. And as they looked back, they kind of pushed that time of their lives away into a bit of a box, and in exile, in containing that part of their lives with all the pain that it represented for them, they also exiled the part of themselves that was active in that time, almost kind of forgetting that part, or exiling that part. Good morning, Suzanne. Wonderful to have you here with us today. Welcome. So it's really interesting because through our work, they were able to reclaim and appreciate those parts that had been kind of forgotten, because they closed the door on this whole chapter in a way, and with it went all of these strengths and abilities to be resilient and to utilize these phenomenal powers that they had, so to speak. And my sense is that that's not a terribly uncommon dynamic, that many of us have experienced very traumatic periods of our lives, and um, and out of self-defense have closed the door, so to speak, on those periods, and as a result kind of closed the door on parts of ourselves that were expressed during those times. So in relationship, for instance, maybe we've had a relationship that went sideways, and then we close the door on that relationship, and all the pain and upset and trauma, to just close it and move on. But by closing that door, we sort of left the part of ourselves there, maybe that was really 100% present and giving and loving and whatever in the context of that relationship, because we saw other parts or other experiences that were really painful. And it's kind of a baby with the bathwater syndrome, just sort of collapsing the whole dynamic into one container or one event that then took the good with the bad. And then there's the process of rediscovery of those strengths. I mean, for if you have survived trauma, even if there was nothing good in that trauma and that dynamic that the trauma emerged from, there was a resilience that you had in the face of it. I mean, you survived it. You're here to speak about it, or you're here to continue living beyond it. And so I think it's a very interesting exercise to reclaim these parts of ourselves. Like, for instance, let's say you started a business and maybe the business failed, and I've had that experience. And for the longest time, I actually had a restaurant that failed years and years and years ago. And for years, I wouldn't cook. One of the reasons that I got into, hello, Duncan, welcome, welcome. Great to be here with you. So glad you're joining us. We're talking about reclaiming ourselves or remembering who we are. And so I had this business, and it was a restaurant, and I had gone into it because I really loved cooking. And when the restaurant failed, I I didn't cook for years. I just I threw away that part of me that loved cooking because it was so deeply linked to the trauma that I experienced in the failure of that business. Welcome, welcome, Pat. Great to have you here with us. Good afternoon to you. So we're talking about reclaiming parts of ourselves that we may have exiled when we close the door on a difficult or traumatic experience in our past. And um, mining these parts of ourselves. It was really, really interesting to be having conversation with one of my clients who, as I was saying, is very dynamic. Well, it happened with a couple clients at least. Very dynamic, and in putting a certain part of their lives behind them, they included in that bundle, probably unwittingly, included parts of themselves that were really powerful, positive, resilient, strong parts of themselves. So with this restaurant too, I was afterwards, for me, I was beaten. I felt really beaten and defeated, and I, for the longest time, forgot about the part of myself that was bold enough to take on that challenge. You know, it was like I not only forgot about it, but I think I probably twisted my perception of that part of myself to be more on the lines of, well, that didn't work out so well. Who do I think I was? Who did I think I was to be able to do that? Hello, hello, welcome, Lisa. So good to have you with us. We're talking about reclaiming parts of ourselves that we may have abandoned or exiled during our lives. In other words, remembering who we are. And they're all different degrees of remembering who we are. Certainly, I mean, one aspect of that is to remember that we are spirit made manifest in physical form, that we have all kinds of capabilities available to us that we don't even imagine. I'm talking about it today in a more mundane context, in the context of living daily life, and how we forget parts of ourselves, or we leave them behind, parts of ourselves that are wide-eyed and innocent and joyful and excited about taking on new things, or energized about the adventures that might be unfolding for us. I think we've all left parts of ourselves behind that are worth reclaiming. And I'm wondering, as you think about it, what parts of yourself would you like to reclaim? The parts that you used to be, that you reveled in, even perhaps at one point. What's available to you in reclaiming these parts, and what parts would they be? I think there's probably there's a I was always a really serious kid, um, so I understand, but I think that there were parts of me that were whimsical, and I'm still, thankfully, I'm still curious and exploratory, but I think that maybe there was a greater sense of enthusiasm that I used to have, as a real excitement and delight, and and to be able to have ready access to that again, would be really awesome. I remember, uh, when there are times when I've felt really jaded at the world, and what we're up to, what it seems like the direction of the world has gone or is going. And in those moments, I yearn for the innocence that I used to have. I think I'm still kind of like, there's still a naivety about me, but it's not naive, if that makes any sense at all. So Lisa says, I had my awakening beginning of last year. It's the first time I looked in the mirror and saw the real me. Wow. I was a loving, giving person, but after my illness, I was bitter and afraid. It's so nice to be me again, and I like myself. Wow, Lisa, so exactly. Congratulations. How beautiful and wonderful that you were able to remember yourself, to reclaim yourself, and to recognize how sometimes circumstances, how sometimes we are spurred by circumstance into patterns and behaviors and beliefs that are really not reflective of our authentic selves. And I love that you made the distinction of the the expression of yourself after the illness, and then reclaiming your essence, reclaiming your loving and giving nature. And sometimes when we experience major challenges in life, like illness or accidents, tragedies, we sometimes get into the mindset that somehow we're being punished, and as a result we punish ourselves by separating ourselves from the aspects of our being that give us the most joy and satisfaction and vitality and reward. And this is an opportunity to be consciously looking back and saying, wow, what was at play. I used to be so much more, fill in the blank, whatever that is. I used to be so much more, and I really liked that about myself. Or when it comes to power, even, it was like, wow, I scared myself with that. Hello, hello, and welcome, Tammy. Great to have you here with us. So we're talking about remembering who you are, reclaiming parts of ourselves that we left behind, either by becoming disenchanted or by associating um, trauma or difficult times with different aspects of ourselves. Like, I was so naive that I got myself into trouble, and now I'm really cynical. I made bad decisions because I was naive or trusting, and now I'm really cynical, but I'm bitter and miserable. It's like, well, maybe there's a way to be able to integrate that naivety or that trust with wisdom, trusting ourselves more deeply, recognizing the gift in that ability to trust ourselves, and then from there trust our ability to navigate in the world. So I'm wondering what other kinds of circumstances or experiences that you've had that you might relate to around this topic. So I'm just trying to think of other situations, because I think what happens is, especially from difficult or traumatic instances in our lives, we often learn the wrong lesson, and it can take time to come back around and find our way. So for instance, with trusting somebody, the lesson that I've heard people learn is, well, I'm never going to trust anybody again. Well, that's not the lesson. The lesson is to be paying more attention to the messages and the knowing that you have, because oftentimes we override that and trust somebody, and then it blows up in our faces. But the lesson isn't don't trust, the lesson is pay attention, and then we can build a greater trust in ourselves. And that's a really, really important and valuable thing to understand. Tammy says, I stopped being spontaneous because of decisions I made. And that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy, because spontaneity is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm wondering, Tammy, so the stopping being spontaneous um, came from fallout, obviously, from some decisions that you made, and maybe the lesson isn't not to be spontaneous, but to be more present, to be more alert to what's going on, and then respond, like to be responding in the context of the invitation to spontaneity, rather than foolhardiness. I think that there's a distinction between being foolhardy and being spontaneous. And maybe if we can access the specifics around the spontaneity, or around whatever it is, that what the call is to us. If we can incorporate our deeper trust of ourselves, um, I think there's a difference too, potentially, between being spontaneous and impetuous or impulsive. I think there may be a difference. And if you can make the distinction between spontaneity and impulsiveness, or um, I think that if we can make that distinction, then it opens the door for spontaneity again, because there's something beautiful about spontaneity, right? And sometimes we make bad decisions, so by shutting ourselves down or shutting ourselves off, uh, that kind of kills off part of our life and our spark. But I'm thinking that there's degrees, that there are maybe finer distinctions that we get to make around, for instance, spontaneity versus impulsive or impetuousness. Lisa says, I truly thought I was being punished. There you go. And if all my husband and and if all my husband, am I bad? What did I do? So do I deserve this? And so I'd ask my husband, am I bad? What did I do? Do I deserve this? And he'd reply, no, that's silly. And Lisa, I I can understand that we go into this notion of being punished. And my guess is that through your illness and coming out on the other side, that you've had some of the richest lessons of your life and richest insights and awarenesses as a result. That's my guess, because I see, first of all, you're here in a community of people that are looking at life from a vantage point that life is happening for us and through us rather than to us. So there's a gift here, as twisted as it might seem from the outside looking in. That's actually what started our conversation, this conversation that I was referring to earlier with my client. And Tammy says, yes, impulsive, need to deal with that, but I need to bring spontaneity back. Yes, exactly, Tammy, because spontaneity is just vital life connection, right? Is just being able to flow with life, and that's distinctive or distinct from being impulsive. Because I think there's, like, impulsiveness is being driven without without thought, where spontaneity is maybe being inspired. And I see spontaneity and inspiration as sisters, at least. So what we get to do is reclaim these parts of yourself. So Lisa, the part of you that was feeling, maybe there was a part of you that, underlying everything to come up with those questions, was, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe there's something that I don't, I deserve to be punished for. I mean, a lot of us have gone through life doing a lot of self-talk about how we're unworthy, and we um, how we don't deserve what we have, or how we're bad or wrong. And then something happens in life, and we think, oh my gosh, it's finally caught up with me, now I'm being punished. And um, I find it more empowering, at least, to be looking at what is the gift in this opportunity, what is the gift in this circumstance, what is the opportunity here. And that's coming from a place that life is happening for me and through me rather than to me. And it's not a matter of punishment, as maybe it's an opportunity to wake up. Maybe it's an opportunity to notice something that we didn't notice before. I mean, my experience is that life tries to teach us lessons, or our higher self, or whatever you want to call it, tries to teach us lessons, and first comes in a whisper. And if we don't listen to the whisper, the message gets louder. And if we don't listen to the louder message, then the message gets even louder. And sometimes it ends up in something pretty dramatic that we can't possibly ignore anymore. And from that place, then we have the opportunity to have the gift and the growth from whatever that circumstance might be. So, Tammy, let's see, I read what you said, Tammy. And Rosalind says, I used to be able to drink a lot more wine. If I drank too much, if I drink too much, then it wipes me out the next day. I would like to go to wine tasting more. It just has to be in little increments, not two or three glasses. Yeah, I get that. I get that. I think I used to be able to drink more as well. And I guess moderation is key. Wine tasting rather than wine drinking, right? Maybe there's that distinction. But that's a lovely thing too, to be looking at things that you enjoy. And so wine tastings and food tastings, such a rich sensual experience, to be able to savor something. I mean, we start every day by rubbing our hands together on this show to become present to the deliciousness of our physical sensations. And wine tasting, especially if you have an educated palate, is such a richly sensual, not to mention delicious experience, right? To identify the nuances of flavor, and to really immerse yourself in that sensual experience. So I mean, there's so much available to us that we can reclaim, that we've left behind. And I think that that's a part of our wholeness. I mean, we often talk about owning our sorrow and owning our anger and owning our grief, but we don't often talk about the good parts of ourselves, quote unquote good, but the other, what we consider as positive parts of ourselves that we've left behind as life has gone on. And I think we get to reclaim those parts of ourselves too. The playfulness, the joyfulness, the silliness, even, to access these delicious parts of ourselves that sort of fell by the wayside, or our power, or our conviction, our willingness to take a stand for something, our courage. There's so much that we may have abandoned that we get to reclaim and make present again in our lives. So, on that note, I invite you to dig in and find some of those treasures that got packed away in the attic or the basement of your being, through the past, and reawaken those things, invite them back in, and enjoy them, and nurture them, just as we spend all this time with healing wounds. Let's bring these parts of ourselves back. Lisa says, I got back to nature. Beautiful, beautiful. Started returning to the beach and biking and hiking. I took myself back. Finding out about my paternity had a lot to do with connecting the dots. Before my mom died, she wrote me a long letter. The last thing she told me was to never change, then I did. But I'm finally back 20 years later. Wow. Lisa, welcome home. Welcome back. And it's great to have you back. And I can say that for all of you who have gone through the fire, traveled through the darkness, or are traveling through it and moving into the light. So with that, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and Maggie and I go live each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. It is my pleasure and my privilege to be here with you and to be engaging in these dialogues. And I am so grateful to you for sharing yourselves and your hearts so candidly and authentically. So, um, you truly enrich my life and my day uh, every day. So, with that, lots and lots of love to you and reclaim your treasures.